Hello everybody, it's Non-Scene News here, and today we've gotten a lot of breaking dates today, and the first news we'll be talking about today is first coming from the Russian and Ukrainian conflict. So during the previous couple days and the previous 48 hours, there's been significant news regarding the Ukrainian and Russian conflict. One being the prospects of peace in Ukraine, two, the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, and three, the sudden Russian breakthrough in the Donetsk region. So let's just get first into the prospects of peace between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So a couple days ago now, as probably most of you already know, the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin in Moscow on August the 6th, 2025. So the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's meeting lasted around about 3 hours. The meeting in Moscow was described as constructive and useful. After the meeting, the US President Donald Trump announced that his special envoy Steve Witkoff held highly productive meetings with the Russian President Vladimir Putin to try and end the war. Trump stated that great progress was made towards ending the war in Ukraine, with plans to work with European allies in the coming days and weeks to secure a peace deal. Furthermore, the the Secretary of State of America, Marco Rubio, announced that for the first time since the admin began, apparently the US has concrete examples for the first time of what kind of things that Russia would ask for in order to end the war. So Marco Rubio has announced that the United States has now gotten concrete examples of what Russia is asking for in order to end the war in Ukraine. And probably one of the biggest news that was probably a direct result of the outcome of the Steve Witkoff and Vladimir Putin meeting is that Donald Trump will be meeting the Russian president himself on August the 15th this week, 2025. So just a couple days after the Steve Witkoff and Vladimir Putin meeting, Donald Trump has announced that he will be having his own meeting with Vladimir Putin on August the 15th this week on Friday in the great state of Alaska. So you can see here in the bottom left corner, Donald Trump announced this message on his Truth social media platform. So he announced that the highly anticipated meeting between myself as President of the United States of America and President Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation will take place next Friday, August the 15th, 2025 in the great state of Alaska. The Russian side has also acknowledged this. The Russian presidential aide Yushkov confirmed the Putin and Trump meeting in Alaska on August the 15th. The Russian presidential aide announced that Russia and the United States are close neighbors, so it's logical that Putin and Trump will meet in Alaska. But according to the Russian presidential aide Yushkov, the meeting is not just about the settlement in the war in Ukraine. Russia is also meeting the United States for prospects for Arctic cooperation between the United States and America, and energy and trade proposals. And furthermore, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, made some further comments on his future meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin on August the 15th. Just today, a couple of hours ago, the US President held a press conference where he went over a couple of things on the Russian and US meetings in Alaska. So let's just go over the key statements by the US President during his press conference here in your bottom left corner. So Donald Trump announced that he will ask the Russian president to end the conflict in Ukraine. Trump will try and return some of the territories to Ukraine. Donald Trump claims that within the first couple of minutes of the meeting between himself and Putin, he will understand whether a deal is possible. The US may withdraw from diplomacy on Ukraine, following the meeting, and if it fails. Donald Trump stated that he has a very good relationship with Zelensky, but he does not agree what he has done. Donald Trump has announced that he's pretty dissatisfied with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine's words, that he will need constitutional approval on territorial issues in Ukraine. Donald Trump announced that 88% of residents of Ukraine want a peace deal with Russia. Donald Trump did not confirm his intention to invite Zelensky to the meeting with Putin in Alaska. Trump expects that after his meeting with Putin, there will be a meeting between the Russian leader and Zelensky. Donald Trump also made a slip of the tongue, saying that he was going to go to Russia, but later the White House confirmed that he wasn't. Donald Trump also announced that he allows for the normalization of trade relations between Russia and the United States if a peace agreement is made in Ukraine. So that is the key statements from the US President Donald Trump's latest press conference about the Russian and Ukrainian conflict. And furthermore, we've also just gotten some news today that the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin will be taking place at Anchorage, Alaska. So this small town here in Anchorage. So the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin will be taking place at Anchorage, Alaska. This place right here. So very interesting news. Now let's finally get into the reaction of the Europeans regarding the situation and the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. So a lot of European leaders and a lot of Europe are a bit divided on their opinions on the matter of the meetings between Trump and Putin, but it seems that most of them are very skeptical, especially Ukraine. The head of NATO, Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, announced that the Trump and Putin meeting will be a test of Russia's readiness to end the war in Ukraine. According to Mark Rutte, on this Friday, President Trump will test Putin. It is important to find out how serious Putin is in achieving peace in Ukraine, and the only person who can determine this is President Donald Trump. Therefore, holding the meeting is of great importance of NATO. Furthermore, the Chancellor of Germany, the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, called on the United States of America and Russia not to decide the issue of Ukrainian territories, I quote, over the heads of Europe and Ukraine. The Vice President of the European Commission, Kaja Kallas, announced that Putin only wants a photo with Donald Trump and to postpone sanctions. So according to the Vice President of the European Commission, Russia is trying to buy time here by meeting Donald Trump. According to the head of Ukraine, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, Trump and Putin will not decide anything without Ukraine, Zelensky noted. Zelensky noted that the conversation between Putin and Trump may be important for their bilateral track, but they will not make any decisions about Ukraine and Ukrainian territory without us. And while actually on the topic of territory transfers between Ukraine and Russia, we've gotten news that according to the Wall Street Journal, Putin will agree to a complete ceasefire in Ukraine if Ukraine withdraws troops from the entire eastern Donetsk region. So if you remember, like maybe 3 to 6 months ago, or perhaps even a year, President Vladimir Putin announced that in order for the ending of the war in Ukraine, Ukraine must hand over the remaining territory of the Kherson Oblast, the Zaporozhian Oblast, and the Donetsk Oblast in order to achieve peace in Ukraine. It seems that Putin has now changed his point of view, and Putin will now agree to according to the Wall Street Journal, by the way, according to the Wall Street Journal, Putin will now agree to a complete ceasefire if Ukraine withdraws troops from the entire eastern Donetsk region. And just today, it seems that Ukraine has completely refused this. Zelensky has just announced today, actually at the time of recording this video, that Ukraine will not pull out of the Donbass region, as such a move would open the way for Russia to attack into different oblasts and territories in Ukraine. So very interesting news. So with that, it seems there's probably only 4 possible scenarios of the ending of the war in Ukraine regarding the borders. So if you can see here in the bottom left corner, there are 4 options for the border of Ukraine. The British Times has announced. The first option here on your top right, top left corner, sorry, the first option is freezing the front line. This is probably the most likely option that is going to be going to be happening, where the front lines will eventually just become the border between Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, there will have to be a lot of straightening out on the border, but the most likely option is the freezing of the front line. The second one is that the entire Donbass goes to Russia. This is a lot less likely than the first one, but is still a very big option. The third is that Ukraine's borders, if Russia wants to fully take control of Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, and Luhansk regions, so Russia would take the Kherson, Zaporozhye, and Donetsk regions. And the fourth and last one, which is the least likely, that Russia would exchange the territories from of the Donbass in exchange for Kherson. So Russia would give back the Kherson Oblast in order to obtain all the Donbass, which is again very unlikely. But that is according to the British Times. We've also gotten some breaking updates today that, according to Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, one of the neighbor countries of Ukraine, has announced that the Ukrainians have officially lost the war, and that Russia has won the war in Ukraine. So according to Viktor Orban, the Ukrainians have officially lost the war. Russia has won this war. The only question is when and under what circumstances will the West, who are behind the Ukrainians, admit that this has happened, and what will be the result from all of this. So according to Viktor Orban, Ukraine has officially lost and Russia has won the war in Ukraine. I would love to hear your, your points of views on who's won the war. I know a lot of people are very split on who's won the war in between Russia and Ukraine. A lot of people are saying Russia has won the war, obviously with its big land grab on Ukraine, and it's officially got a land bridge between to Crimea, which is very of a strategic importance of Russia. And Russia has also most likely will be not letting Ukraine join NATO. Ukraine will. A lot of people say that Ukraine has won because it's managed to defend off against the second biggest power in the world. A lot of people say Ukraine's won that, while the West has won against Russia. That as a direct result of the war in Ukraine, as a direct result of Russia invading Ukraine, Sweden and Finland has joined NATO. Let's not forget that. That has added a huge border between NATO and Russia because of the result of the Ukraine war. So it's very mixed. I would love to hear your guys' opinion on who's actually won the war in Ukraine. And finally, now let's turn ahead to the front line in Ukraine. So if you've watched on-scene news before, you probably know that I don't cover the frontline updates in Ukraine. There are plenty of other people that are much better than me that cover this, but today is a little bit different because the Russian forces have managed to achieve huge success in the battlefield, success that we haven't really seen since the start of the war in terms of huge advancements in the front lines and breakthroughs. So to explain simply, Russian forces used hundreds of motorcycles in the last few weeks to slowly gain positions behind Ukrainian troops. They progressed very fast behind the Ukrainian lines to establish positions and wait for reinforcements. It is very fast and very efficient. On paper, Ukrainian brigades are meant to and are supposed to be here, where the Russian forces are actively pushing. But it seems that a lot of Ukrainian troops are deserting, according to Russian sources. So the Ukrainian sources claim that the Russian forces have advanced nearly up to 15 kilometers north of Provansk. So if you can see this highlighted region here. This was where the region where the Russians managed to achieve its huge progress. So if you see in the brighter red region, we can see huge progress. And if you can see this grey outline here, this is the unknown zone. This is where apparently Russian troops are rumored to be right now. So again, there's a lot of fog of war going on. We don't know where the Russians are, so I'll keep you updated on this. But the Russians have managed to achieve a huge breakthrough in the Russian Ukrainian battlefield, and the Russians have managed to achieve nearly a 15-kilometer breakthrough. So very interesting news. And the furthest we've gotten, the Russian troops have probably managed, if not already at the time of recording this video, perhaps broke through 20 kilometers. And that in miles is 12 miles. So again, huge news. Again, I'm not a frontline, I'm not a military strategist. I don't report any of the news on the ground of the Ukraine, but that is the news coming from today. And furthermore, we've also got some breaking updates today that Russia and Belarus are going to be conducting joint military exercises in Belarus from September the 12th to September the 16th, 2025, signaling deepening military cooperation amid regional tensions and ongoing war in Ukraine. So, if you can see these pictures here, we've gotten some pictures and videos of preparations of Russian and Belarusian military exercises in the territory of Belarus. A lot of people are saying this is signaling to Ukraine if a peace deal isn't made pretty soon, then Russia will probably use these military exercises and bring more military equipment and launch a surprise attack to perhaps the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. This is kind of what happened in 2022 when Russia launched its offensive at Kiev too. The next news we'll be talking about today is coming from Germany. That almost 60% of Germans are not ready to fight against Russia in case of an invasion. Furthermore, we've also got some news today that almost 60% of Germans are not ready to fight against Russia in case of an invasion. The latest polls from the Telegraph reported in Germany. So apparently only 16% of those surveyed in Germany are definitely, according to the recent polls, are ready to defend the country from a potential outside threat like Russia. So 60% of Germans are, according to the latest polls, are not ready to fight Russia in case of invasion. And furthermore, the next news we'll be talking about today is coming from the Middle East, and more specifically coming from the Gaza and Israeli conflict. So we've got news that's during the past 48 hours, we've got a news that Israel's Security Cabinet has officially approved the occupation of Gaza. So Israel's Security Cabinet has given the IDF and the Israeli army full permission and authority to occupy all of Gaza. So this is very big news. So after 10 hours behind the curtains and a lot of rumors, the decision to approve the takeover of Gaza, the whole Gaza Strip, has officially been made. So with this news, we've gotten a lot of satellite imagery showcasing Israel amassing large amount of troops, tanks, armored vehicles outside of Gaza, especially near the central Israeli and border right here. A lot of Israeli tanks, armored cars, and armored vehicles and troops are massing it in this area here. The preparations for a full takeover of the Gaza Strip are officially underway, and the IDF announced just today that it will be calling up 200,000 reservists to fill the ranks of the full occupation of the Gaza Strip. The next news we'll be talking about today is coming from the United States of America. So we've got news today that the US President Donald Trump has announced the federalization of Washington, D.C. and the mass crackdown on crime at the American capital. Donald Trump stated that DC's murder rate is higher or on par with Mexico City. Car thefts have doubled in Washington, D.C. Carjackings have tripled. Murders are at the highest rate in decades, according to the US government. So Donald Trump has ordered a new initiative to, I believe, federalize Washington, D.C. So a lot of police, a lot of authority are coming to Washington, D.C. to try and crack down on crime. So very interesting news. The last news we'll be talking about today is the US debt. We've got news that the US debt has just surpassed $37 trillion, an historic first. So up $708 billion since Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That's $22 billion added every single day. So since Donald Trump has passed his One Big Beautiful Bill, there's been approximately $780 billion added to the US national debt. So very interesting news. And sorry, that's all the news I actually have for you today. I can't cover absolutely everything. I wish I could. I just don't have the time, but I am non-scene news. I'll try and provide you news that medias around the world do not show you. I'll try and do these videos hopefully more often, but again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye.